Hey everyone, Pastor George here, and my brain hurts so much. Oh, I hate Twitter, but I love it at the same time. Today in our Theolog, we're going to be looking at something from Cenk Uygur. Sorry, Cenk Uygur is a political commentator, and I saw this pop up last Friday, and I thought that this is something we should talk about because this is how a lot of people think about religion, and it just hurts my brain. It really does. So, as many of you probably are aware of, there is a conflict going on right now, although I guess it's kind of simmered down a little bit by this point between Israel and Palestine in the Middle East and stuff like that. And of course, whenever this is brought up, you have all sorts of great hot takes from political ones to economic ones to religious ones, because of course religion kind of figures prominently, or at least in the debate around Israel and Palestine. And so Cenk Uygur, who's a political commentator, had this brilliant insight for us all this morning. All of the religions are such obvious mythology, of course, yet serious people are forced to have nonsensical conversations about mythical creatures like the superhero who could turn bread into fish, strange superpower choice, and the sky god who is peculiar similar to Homo sapiens. Yeah. So there's a lot, going on with this gem, I guess you could call it. So I'm going to go through it line by line and kind of expose the underlying thinking. And the reason I think it's important is because a lot of people will say these things, usually behind the safety of a computer, usually not in public. Uh, and people who did this well or did this in a funny manner, like Christopher Hitchens, I can at least enjoy because I can laugh at them or laugh with them when they make funny arguments and things like that. But this is just like 2006 called and it wants its atheism back. This is what this is like. Like very few people, serious people, are like this anymore. But it still pops up and people still think it's good. Clearly, 1,342 people thought that this was like worthy. So let's go through this. So all of the religions are such obvious mythology. Yes, they're so obvious that most people believe them. That's what obvious means, right? Well, obvious, it comes from the Latin obvium, which means in the way, like on the way, on the road, right? So it's something you run into on the road, you can't miss it. That's type of the meaning, right? So, this is clearly just bombastic rhetoric meant to just show off a sense of superiority, which I think happens a lot in all sides of religious conversations, right? People will say, oh, it's so obvious that the Bible is true, or it's so obvious that God exists. It's so obvious that religion is false, or it's so obvious that it's mythology, right? And the problem is that in many senses, I think that it can be obvious, or certain parts can be obvious when you come to, depending on what religion you're talking about, what part of the Bible you're talking about, but it's not obvious, right? A lot of people struggle and wrestle with these things. The Bible talks about that itself, right? So even the disciples wrestled. It wasn't obvious to them at the time that things were going on. And so it's not always obvious. And I think the best thing we can have is have charity for people who disagree with us, unless I guess, and we still have charity for Cenk. We should, but he's on his high horse, and of course that means you have to knock him down a few pegs or whatever. But yeah, it's clearly wrong, right? Like, you know, what part of the religions are mythology? All of them? Like, did Jesus not exist? Did he exist? Did he do some of the things he did? It's like too broad, right? It's too broad, doesn't make any sense argumentatively. And I say all these things because you might run into people in your own lives, your own families who believe these things. You need to actually kind of have a retort for when this comes up. You can't just kind of let people stew in their ignorance, even if it's more comfortable for you. One, because you should try and bring the gospel to people at all times. But honestly, two, like, we're supposed to love our neighbor, and keeping them in ignorance is not something that's good. So, challenging them, getting them to think outside their headspace a little bit is good for them. All right, moving on. Yet serious people are forced to have nonsensical conversations about mythical creatures like the superhero who could turn bread into fish, strange superpower choice, and the sky god who is peculiarly, I struggle with that word, peculiarly similar to Homo sapiens. A lot of that LR thing blends together there. All right. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, 5 seconds to figure out what the biggest error in this is. If you guessed, it never happens that Jesus turns bread into fish. Congratulations. You win the prize of being biblically literate, or at least semi-biblically literate, for one of the most famous miracles that Jesus ever performs. So yes, he talks about how we are forced to have nonsensical conversations, right? So what he's saying is we have these conversations about whether or not these things happen when it's so obvious that they're nonsense, right? About mythical creatures like the superhero. So apparently he does think Jesus is a myth, which is wrong from a historical perspective. Nearly all historians agree that Jesus Christ existed as a person. Whether or not he is the Son of God is the thing that is up to debate, really, when it comes to Jesus. But whether or not he existed is besides the fact. And I guess whether or not he did miracles is also up to debate. But generally, people know that he exists. So to call him a mythical creature, well, I don't know. That's, he's not a unicorn, like he exists. It'd be like to call the Buddha a mythical creature. Even if I believe that the Buddha didn't do everything that Buddha say he did, still don't think he's a myth, right? So, yeah, I don't know. He's just being provocative, I guess. But of course, the best way to undercut your argument when dealing with people is to show that you actually have no knowledge of the source material at all, right? Turning bread into fish, and then he refers to it as a superpower choice. He does this pretty often. I've seen another tweet where he kind of just refers to religions as kind of being different followers of Marvel characters, which of course is just high intelligent uh, thing going on there. So we have bread into fish. Of course, the real story is Jesus feeds the 5,000 by multiplying loaves and fishes, right, to feed many people. And there's theological significance to that, and obviously just care for people significance to that, right? It's not, Jesus can do all sorts of things. I mean, Jesus can turn bread into fish if he wants to, right? If we're Christians, we believe he's God. So yeah, he can easily turn bread into fish, but that's not the story. It just doesn't make sense why you would say that unless you were just ignorant of the thing. I don't think he's stupid. Really, there's always two possibilities for things like this. It's either stupidity, so like lack of intelligence, just generally, or ignorance, right? Just not doing your work. And so I'm always willing to give the benefit of the doubt and say that it's ignorance over stupidity. Although obviously saying something ignorant can make you look stupid. And the sky god, who is peculiarly similar to Homo sapiens. Well, this is kind of funny. So, one of the big criticisms, I guess, of religion from people in the atheist side is that God looks too much or acts too much like a human. So we've created a God in our own image, if you want to use this biblical terminology. Um, well, this isn't actually true for all religions. One, and in Christianity, it's not. We have a belief that God fashioned us in His image, so it's not. He is similar to us only in the fact that He's our creator, right? Not that we made Him. I think that where this can be leveled very well is in pagan religions, right, where the gods basically are humans, just with long life and divine abilities and things like that. But that's not really what God is like, right? God isn't a human. I've talked about this before. A lot of people like look to the emotions like jealousy and things like that and think that that's what it's talking about, but it's not. It's more of a righteousness, right? That's different. So we are like God, but we are very unlike God, and that's really important to Christianity, right? Is that one of the big things you can do is be hubristic, which means to move beyond your station, right? That's one of our big problems when it comes to sin is we put ourselves in the place of God. Referring to God as a sky god is just a way to make it sound as though it's backwards, right? That it's a bunch of people wandering around in the ancient world trying to make sense of things and worshiping the moon or the sun. And clearly, again, not what's happening. But I don't think he really cares that much. So I don't know. This hurts my brain. Twitter is bad for you uh, in high doses, so don't go on there too much. Yeah, just remember whenever you engage with people, to make sure that they actually know what they're talking about. The easiest thing to point out to Cenk here would be, uh, like, what else is a mythology? If Christianity is a mythology, then all of our morals and the government systems that come from them. That's the easiest place to go all the time. Because when you cut out the religion, you lose all of its benefits, right? That's what rationality should cause us to do, and the best atheists engage in that. But unfortunately, I'm sure Cenk believes, as a political commentator, in all sorts of positive things that have come from Christianity. So it's just such a blasé opinion, and it's so boring. But I wanted to talk about it because it was stupid, like the turn bread into fish thing. That was pretty dumb, and because of the uh, implications that it has, that a lot of people can agree with this type of thing, and we have to be ready to meet them when they talk about it. So I hope the rest of you have a more edifying rest of your Tuesday, and I'm sorry for killing your brain cells. See you tomorrow for Bible study. Peace out.